Hello, my name is Allison Carmen, and welcome to my podcast, 10 Minutes to Less Suffering. And the name of today's podcast is When You Think Things Are Bad. And the idea of this podcast came from some conversations that I've had with a very dear friend over the past few weeks. My friend went for her mammogram, and it was determined that they found something that looks suspicious. And for those of you who don't know, when you get a mammogram and something looks suspicious, the doctor will either decide to wait and watch it, or they'll send you for a biopsy. And my friend was sent for a biopsy. And so it was a couple of weeks that she had to deal with the unknown of having to get the biopsy and waiting for the results. And I am very aware of what this experience is like, because around 3.5 years ago, I had the same experience. And what's so interesting is that I am so committed to maybe, and I am so committed to gratitude, and I'm so committed to all my practices. But when something like that happens, that fear that things are bad, that fear that you're sick, the fear of what will happen, the fear of leaving your children, all these things come up. And yes, there are people who stay open and say, I'm not going to worry about it until it happens. And I admire those people very much. But for many of us, when we have so many things in our life that we love and care so deeply about, it's very unsettling when we go through experiences like that. And when I went through that experience, the thing I noticed the most is that fear gets so extreme that we forget that even if that fear comes true, there still are more possibilities. There's still more life to live. There are still moments to enjoy. What we also do is that fear takes over so much that we give up the moment we're in. So really the fear destroys our thoughts about the future and also destroys the moment. And so when I was speaking to my friend, being very clear, remembering the experience, I of course acknowledged her fear. And we all need to do that. When we're upset about something, when we get bad news, when something unexpected happens, we have to allow how we feel. And that's the processing, and that could be painful. And some people process it for a long time. Some people shift quickly, but that is part of it. What I also found is that in that moment, we are taking that fear to the end, and we're often thinking the worst. So we can also examine that fear even when we're feeling our feelings. And because I was so familiar with this, I asked my friend what her biggest fear was. She was afraid she was going to be very sick and she was going to die and leave her children. She was afraid she was going to be very sick and she didn't know if she had the strength to get through it. And so I asked her, are you absolutely sure that you're sick? And she said no. And then I asked her, are you absolutely sure if you're sick, you won't get better and won't be able to be there for your kids? And she said no. And then I asked her, what else is there? And she knows me very well. So her answer was, there's maybe. And then we went through the maybe statements. And this is where maybe is so powerful. Again, because our fears assume the worst. Our fears forget that even if they happen, possibilities still exist. So the first thing she said is, maybe I'm okay. The second maybe statement was, maybe there are many ways to be okay. Now that's really powerful because that gives her an opening that even if they diagnose her with breast cancer, she could still be okay. And that was creating her biggest fear of leaving her children. She didn't know if she got diagnosed with breast cancer that she wasn't going to get better. And then she said, maybe I'm strong enough to face this. Maybe no matter what happens, I will figure out a way to be well and live a long life and always be able to be with my husband and my children and my friends and my work. And as she kept saying maybe statement after maybe statement, she felt this space within her, this breath. And it didn't mean she wasn't worried about having breast cancer. She's human. She wasn't worried about the process, what it would be like, her suffering. But the maybe made her realize that no matter what happened, she still had hope. That's what fear does. Fear crushes our hope. It makes us feel we're doomed and it's the end. And we forget that even during challenging times, even when things are hard, there's maybe. Maybe is the hope within the unknown. What happens is we look at uncertainty and we think it's bad. We look at uncertainty and we think we're never going to get through this. And we forget that there's another side of it. And that's why I bring the maybe, and it allows us to question our fear, lighten the load, and see that things can change and get better. And the other very powerful thing that I discuss with my friend is the moment that we're in. I reminded her of a Thich Nhat Hanh quote, "The seed of suffering in you may be strong, but don't wait until you have no more suffering before allowing yourself to be happy." I didn't share that quote with her to stop her from feeling her experience, but I just wanted to remind her of all the blessings that surrounded her in the moment. And it's not to force it, like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way because I have so many blessings. No, because that's pressuring ourselves and forcing and not allowing ourselves to be who we are. What we could do is we could allow them to share the stage. I am suffering. I am worried. I didn't expect this. I didn't want to be sick. And at the same time, recognize my beautiful children, my home, how I deeply appreciate these things in the moment. I deeply appreciate this cup of coffee, the walk, the sun, my friends, my family. And let it hold that feeling, hold that fear. It's just a place where we could feel love and the depth of meaning and what it means to be alive. And yet at the same time, allowing her poignancy of the pain that she didn't know if she was sick or not. We don't want to force things. We want to allow things. It's a totally different experience. Allowing has a flow. Allowing has an opening. When we force ourselves, we're closed off. When we force ourselves to have a thought, we become very closed-minded and closed-hearted. And it's hard sometimes because we don't want to feel the pain of what we're experiencing. But when we allow it, it flows. It has a place to go. And then when you have the practice of maybe, not only does it have a place to go, it has a place to transform. You allow your fear to exist on the same playing field as possibilities and hope and good decisions and dreams. And it's just a totally different experience. So it turns out my friend wrote me yesterday with her biopsy results, and she does not have breast cancer. And she decided she was going to go out for a walk and kiss the ground and send hugs to the sky. And yes, she was going to have a big drink when she got home, but have a beautiful dinner with her husband and her son and call her daughter at school and truly embrace the glorious moment. But at the same time, she told me that she realizes this is just a moment. And her experience with maybe made her understand more about the maybe practice and the opening and how fear sometimes has a very negative, detrimental story. And even though it could hold a possibility of something that might happen, it doesn't tell the full story. It doesn't tell everything. Because even during challenging times, things can change. Even when the worst thing you could possibly imagine happens, it doesn't mean that things can't get better. It doesn't mean you can't accept it and find a way to be okay. And sometimes maybe all you have is that thought that maybe I could experience something in this moment with what is left. If you have breath, you have hope, and you have maybe. And even when life is not exactly as we wanted it to be, not exactly as we planned it to be, the moment always offers us something new. And we might have liked the past better. We might have liked how life was a year ago better than today. But there's always something still here. And yes, it could come with pain and it could come with sadness, but there's always a new experience. There's always a joy to grab, a blessing to be had, even during difficult times. So just to remind you of the practice, you ask yourself your biggest fear, and then you question that fear. Are you absolutely certain that fear is true? And you could never be sure about anything about the future. And that's the most liberating thing in the world, because that means your life has maybe. And you start doing those maybe statements, expansive ones, direct ones, specific ones, whatever you need. And you will find that you will feel better, because you will see that fear was taking over. It was center stage, and it was making you believe your life couldn't get better. It was making you believe that things are bad and it's game over. There's always something else. And when you see your fear that way, it doesn't take center stage. It doesn't hook you. It doesn't hold you. It doesn't own you. You take control, because maybe things will get better. Maybe you could accept what's happening and still be okay. Maybe there's something still in this moment to experience, even during a challenging time. And most of all, maybe the best is yet to come. Thank you for listening to this podcast today. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can email me at allison@allisoncarmen.com. If you'd like to buy my books, The Gift of Maybe or Year Without Men, you can find them at all major bookstores and online retailers. And if you like this podcast, you can subscribe and leave a comment.